on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, come on, come on, come on, demons. I've got this feeling.
Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and after a week of being left out in the cold, the D's are back in the 8, and our 2020 destiny is firmly in our hands with 4 rounds left to go. Joining me tonight, long-time Demonland contributor, George. Good evening, George. How are you?
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Demonland podcast, where, like Allen Iverson, we have all the answers.
Also joining us tonight, long-time caller to the show, Bim Man. Good evening, Bim Man.
Good evening, Demonlanders, Andy and George.
Boys, before we go on, I just want to do some housekeeping. We do love hearing from you, Demonlanders. If you'd like to join the program tonight to discuss anything that we talk about, give us a call, 03 9016 3666, or you can Skype us at Demonland31. If you're listening to the show live, you can join us in the chat room where you can ask questions or post comments. Just head over to demonland.com/podcast. If you're listening to the show at your leisure via SoundCloud on demonland.com or via an Apple or Android podcasting app, give us a subscribe to the podcast. You'll receive updates when a new show drops. Don't forget, leave us favourable reviews. It does help more people find us. We're on Spotify and Stitcher as well, so you can get the show that way too. Go to demonland.com, find your preferred links to your preferred listening method. You can join us on Facebook, facebook.com/Demonland31, Twitter at Demonland, Instagram at Demonland31, or on YouTube, just search for Demonland Podcast, and you can listen to some of the interviews we've conducted with current and past players and coaches. If you love talking about the D's 24/7 like we do, join up to Demonland.com and chat with other D's fans about this great club. Now, boys, with that out of the way, it certainly wasn't a pretty game. In fact, at times it was downright ugly to watch. There was a cavalcade of costly turnovers throughout the match. And once again, we were smashed in the clearances. We had standout efforts from Steven May and Christian Petracca. That should be applauded. There was some telling individual efforts in the last 2 minutes of the game, from Lever, Spargo, Hibbard, Viney, Oliver, Langdon, Tomlinson, Salem, Oscar McDonald as well for you, Bim Man. They all threw themselves at the contest and, just to not deny the opposition the ball. And we've been on the receiving end of many close losses, and I just kept expecting, a very Melbourne result as they were going forward in the end, and that snag one in the end, but they didn't. We won. Bim Man, how were your nerves in those last few minutes?
You mentioned a few weeks ago you had your heart rate phone on or some such, and I don't have any of those fancy electronic devices, fortunately, because I would have broken it. I was surprised how fast my heart was beating, and not that it matters, it's just a game of footy, but
it does matter. Anyone listening to this show in their leisure, it does matter.
Yes, I was being facetious, and my family left me well alone, and I was super excited in the last afterwards, but super stressed in that whole second half. Actually, it wasn't. The last 2 minutes was just the sort of reverse icing on the cake.
And George, how was your heart rate going in those last few minutes of the game?
Yeah, certainly in those last 2 minutes, I was the same as probably every other Demon supporter. But in the first quarter, my sister-in-law, who's a nominal St Kilda supporter, texted me and she said, there are 2 teams out there capable of losing in the last quarter. Unfortunately, it was her team rather than ours. So given the turnovers during the game, it was a pretty astute observation even early in the game, but glad to get over the line in the end.
But given our history against St Kilda, we don't usually win those games. I remember a game out at Marvel Stadium or whatever it was called back in those days. where we coughed it up after being in front with a few seconds to go. So I was just expecting a very Melbourne result, and fortunately that didn't happen. Well, let's talk about some of those individual efforts. Steven May, what an outstanding performance from him, perhaps his best in the red and blue. I think I said that last week, but this one was even better. 22 disposals, an incredible 9 marks, of which 6 were intercept marks. He had 12 intercept possessions in total. George, I'll start with you. How many first-round picks would you give up for him now?
I think that game has put paid to all the queries about May's selection. He was fantastic. It's a very good reason why he got the 10 coaches' votes ahead of Petracca in this game. He held us together, and the rest of his backline team. He held us together in those early parts of the game and later in the game as well. That was definitely the best game that I've ever seen him play, and his kicking was superb as well. It wasn't just the intercept marks; it was clearing that zone to set up the opportunities down the field. He was just first class. Like I said, 10 coaches votes just for a very good reason.
And big man, your thoughts on Steven May?
No, as I said last week, he's fast becoming one of my favourite Demons. And I was speaking to a mate during the week, and we're trying to think when was the last game of that quality from a true fullback at the Demons. And I reckon Sean White, perhaps I've missed one or two, but Sean White played a game I remember out of VFL Park that was just incredible, and Danny Hughes played a couple of brilliant games as well, but it was right up there. And as George said, it's sort of underrated to an extent, but his kicking was super important because getting over that zone, the zone that they were putting up, was no easy task. And I'd loved that he was confident to take that kick to the corridor a couple of times and cross the ball. We did one, I think, to Langdon where he kicked it, flushed the ball, but had to get it full, probably a 50, 55 metre kick to switch to the fat side. And it was just a beautiful kick. He's got a great technique. I don't think he didn't seem to miss one all night. He might have turned it over a couple of times, but he was just a wall, wasn't he?
Yeah, an absolute wall. Couldn't get past him. Gave young King an absolute lesson in footy. Even though the commentators kept talking up King, that he was just one mark, a couple of touches at a footy, ready to take start clunking marks. But Steven May absolutely showed him up. Christian Petracca didn't have huge stats, but those 4 goals. Were absolutely match-winning. What a better team to do it to than the team that overlooked you. I'm not sure Track is thinking about that anymore, but I certainly am. But let's talk about that last goal. Say what you will about goal line technology and the controversy. I have no problem with the goal umpire's decision. He was standing right there. He had the best view of that possible. He called it a goal. What do you guys think, George? And I might ask you this question: would you be livid if the situation had been reversed? Not the goal had been reversed. That if we had been on the receiving end of that exact same thing, I guess I can ask you that.
I think you're asking the wrong person about umpires' calls. They're usually poor in my book. In this case, they were fantastic. Look, the umpire was quite literally less than 2 metres away from where the ball was, and all the commentary and all the media have put into it. Forget that he was right there, and the best they're looking at is on a television screen. I looked at it again and again and again today, and quite frankly, I couldn't see where he was supposed to have touched it. The second bounce of the ball was well and truly over the line, and I think he might have managed to get a touch on it after that, but it was even from the front on view, it was clearly over the line. And so in those ones you take it. There are plenty of other wrong decisions during the game, but that one I think was perfectly right. It's easy to forget, people get all excited about this, and but I think Petracca's best work was done early on in the game. with those two early goals. That he was kicking from outside 60 in the first one and a strong mark for the second one. I think those were more telling in the context of the game. Accurate kicking, goals on the scoreboard early really put the Saints right behind the ball. So, his work, I prefer his work in the first quarter rather than the last. And even that one in the last, we were still ahead at that point. So if it had been reversed, we would have been 5 points up and the ball's still at our end of the ground. So you can't say that St Kilda were cheated out of it. They may well have lost the game by a further 1 point.
Big man.
There was a couple of James Brayshaw calls that he loves a big call, and on that one he exclaimed, "Umpire's call is everything in this game." And I thought that's a pretty big call. And before that, with King, he said, "The sky is literally the limit." For the young King, and on that one, I was amazed. First, I was confused why he wasn't paid that mark. I mean, that's a mark 99 out of 100. Where if there's any confusion about the ball being touched by the defender, if the forward marks it, it's a mark almost every time. And arguably could have been paid a free kick for over the shoulder immediately afterwards. His strength to release that ball was and get it onto his foot was just incredible. Because who was on him? Who was it? It wasn't Membry, was it? No, it can't have been Membry on him. But they all look the same, those Saints. But his strength to hold him off and get that kick off. The other thing I thought was fantastic was the break it took to the right. Shane Warne is very happy with that. So I don't know, obviously I'm hopelessly biased, but during the night, it looked to me as it went over. So as George said, the umpire was right there. I mean, who's got the better angle on it? He's crouched over that, and even if that was called a point, we could have trapped the ball in. We'd done that so well all match, so we might have won by more. Who knows?
Well, for me, first of all, go ahead, George.
Yeah, sorry. The St Kilda supporters would be cutting their wrists after the bouncing ball in front of the goals in the 2010 first grand final as well. So they're well acquainted with these situations.
Yeah, and the other thing though, if I was a Saints fan, I would be even more annoyed. At the end of the game, I almost had a heart attack double time when Viney ran past on the very last kick of the match, ran past Kent, and I thought for sure he was going to call 50, which would have put Kent about 40 metres out. I was having Buckenara flashbacks, and of all players to have a shot after the siren, Kent.
Oh, he would have loved that.
So he had virtually no impact on the game, Kent, and it was as bad. It was as close to the player and in the zone as the one Tomlinson gave away, I thought, not just quite as evident. So, I reckon the Saints fan, that I'd like to point that out for any Saints fan who happened to be listening to this.
I doubt we have any Saints fans listening to this, and if they are, well, welcome to the show. But I really hate that rule. That what's it called? It's infringing on the. I don't know
on the protected zone.
Yeah, the protected zone area. Yeah. I really hate that rule. I understand if they're actually infringing and getting in their space, where it actually affects something. But 5 meters away, they're running past it. What are they meant to do? Are they meant to just disappear? Like as soon as, I think Viney said this, last year at some point, what are they meant to do? They can't just vanish into thin air. I know that you've got to run to the side, but he's running down to, he's playing he's got to get down into the back line to protect a space. What's he meant to do?
Yeah, you can't catch COVID in 5 meters. So, what possible problem could it be that distance?
I understand if he's right there and he actually does something to stop the guy from playing on or something, but he was nowhere near him. And, Look, let's just thankful that it didn't happen to Viney. I'd hate to lose a game under, from a 50-metre penalty like that. Going back to the Petracca one, my problem really isn't the goal. For me, it was a clear goal. My problem was the actual mark that was denied. You look at the slow-mo replay, it is an absolute mark. It happened to him another time a bit earlier, and I think it happened on the wing to Brown, maybe took an easy mark that I thought was a mark, and they called touch. And I didn't look at the replay in the slow-mo for that one, but there were a few times they made some horrible calls or non-calls or whatever. But not only did Petracca mark it, he was also being held. The guy was over his shoulder. He chopped the arm. There were about 4 free kicks that could have been paid then. But anyway, that was my thing on the Petracca incident. Clayton Oliver.
Before we move off Petracca, Andy, in my file for most disliked media people is Brendan Goddard is certainly in there, and he did the ABC radio coverage of that game, and would you believe it did not give Petracca a vote. He's kicked 4 8 goals, and he didn't give him one of the votes.
You know what the problem is with some of these guys, and I think they're looking at the stat sheet, and I think that's a real big no-no. You can't just go off the stat sheet. And I don't know if even if you guys saw this over the weekend, they highlighted this where Champion Data had something from the Fremantle game, Fremantle versus the Giants game, and the least ranked player was that Riccardi who kicked 4 goals based on their stats. I don't know how they work out things, but he was the lowest ranked player for that game. I mean, the guys had 15 disposals and kicked 4 goals. How can that be? So stats don't tell the whole story, and I think sometimes these commentators look at the stat sheet and probably saw Petracca only, what did he have, 15 possessions or something?
Yeah.
And has just disregarded it for that. I mean, you don't have to have 28 possessions to be one of the most valuable players on the ground.
Oh, particularly when you kick 50% of your team's goals, and including the match winner.
The match winner, yeah. Clayton Oliver, he had a quiet game last week, and once again he started relatively quiet in this game as well. But I thought he was just immense in that last quarter. I think in the last quarter alone he had 10 possessions, 6 contested. Took him to 26 possessions for the match, 16 contested, 21 pressure acts for the match. It's just remarkable. And we'll talk about the last 2 minutes a bit later on, but there was a good piece of play in there where he sort of was just really composed and ran through traffic and got the ball out to Langdon. I thought he had a terrific last quarter, big man.
He was fantastic, wasn't he? And particularly after a relatively quiet first half. And I think I heard them say on the coverage that, near the end of the second quarter, maybe it only had 3 or 4 kicks at that point of the game, or certainly very few. I thought he was fantastic. It was similar to, I can't remember, maybe it was the Suns game where he really imposed himself, as did Petracca on the contest. And the thing that we've talked about for a few weeks is how much distance he's getting with his kicks forward. He's, powering out of contest. And correct me if I'm wrong, he kicked that one to Petracca, didn't he? He did. At Petracca. And that's exactly what you want from your best mid, is to get full value for his possessions and that kick after the contest. I think one of the stats that they had on the Melbourne website was he had led the game in, what's the stat? It's a funny one. Where is it? First possession, 9. So I presume that's first possession after a stoppage, and that's nine of them, and he often gets that 2-3 steps away from the pack now, and a 40-50 metre kick, and he's such a much better kick when he's getting distance, because he does get good penetration and he gets good depth. His weakness on his kicking is when he's trying those little dinky short kicks. He doesn't seem to have the control, but when they ask him just to release the ball long, he's technically a pretty good kick when he's really giving it a good hit.
George, anything to add on Clary?
Yeah, I thought he was actually changed his game style during the game. I remember writing down some notes in the first half that said stop the short stuff again, short handballs again. There seemed to be a preponderance of that, and then certainly in the second half, and particularly in that last quarter, he changed to using his legs again and breaking out of the contest and then doing the handball or taking the kick. So whether he's told to do that by the coaches or whether he did it himself, but he's certainly a much, much more damaging player than just the simple short handballs that we've seen a lot of in the past. And he needs to keep developing that, because that's going to make him a truly great player. But thankfully he was there in that last quarter. Binman's talked about a couple of those telling possessions, just getting the ball out to Langdon and one out to Vandenberg, and then when he broke out to pass it to Petracca as well. Those were super critical in the context of the whole game. So he was fantastic in that last quarter, and probably saved us just by being able to get hold of the ball and denying the opportunity to St Kilda.
And the other thing that he was excellent in the second half, as was the team. And I think we had 11 tackles in the first half and 25 in the second half, which is obviously a lot better in terms of pressure. But the criticism of Goodwin last week that I certainly made was, getting the team up at half-time when we were flat with a lucky lead of 8 points and coming out even flatter after half-time. I think that's a reasonable criticism that he has to wear, obviously the players too. But, the flip to that is credit where credit's due. They played terrific in the second half, and he was a great example of it. He had a flat first half and was able to take his game to a much higher level. So did Brayshaw, so did a number of players. So from that level, I think a lot of credit has to go to Goody and Richo for getting the boys in the right headspace when they came back out, because particularly after how they finished the first half, how dispiriting that last minute or 40 seconds of football was, to come out and be focused and switched on in a game that's everything to play for. Credit where credit's due. They did the job, and Goody must take some responsibility for that as well.
You guys make an interesting point that Clary sort of changed the way after half-time, the way he plays. I think his default is to do those quick handballs out, and so I think someone must have had a talk with him, because he certainly changed the way he was playing in that second half. Just in terms of our midfield, again, we sort of lost that clearance battle in the middle. Big Man, how did you see sort of our work in the middle, out of the middle, in terms of our matching up with them? Sort of Steele sort of got first use of the ball every time. Our hit-outs were about 50-50 for the game. So how did you see that sort of playing out?
Yeah, it was interesting, the tackle numbers. I think it was only 2 in the second quarter from memory. And yes. But it's sort of hard not to think there's at least partly a tactical aspect to that, because I think Viney went to Steele in the end, and certainly in the square, he played from the centre square. But, maybe it's the way we have the defence set up. George is probably better sort of to speak to that. But it tactically didn't seem to concern them too much. It didn't, they didn't break glass and in case of emergency and bring someone else in, or didn't seem to change their matchup. In fact, they put track forward more often. I'd love to see what his numbers were in this game, but my suspicion is he played more forwards, rather than putting him in the middle to try and break their dominance. But they weren't getting any value for those clearances. And another stat from that I thought was really interesting. From their centre square, they had, where is it? The St Kilda had, where is it? Can't see it. Forward half possession. So 26 forward half possessions, and goals. No, I can't see it. Sorry, but they just didn't seem to make much benefit from from that dominance. But it's curious. That's 2 weeks in a row, 3 weeks almost, that the opposition's beat us in that area.
Were you looking for the goals per inside 50s, the percentages?
Yeah, no,
Melbourne 27. Yeah, Melbourne 27%, St Kilda 15% from inside 50s. That just on the tackle one, we had 11 in the first half. I believe it was only 2 in the second quarter, but then 25 after half time. So we certainly lifted the intensity in that respect. Ed Langdon, unless George, did you want to add anything to our centre work?
No, I think Binman hit it on the head. The centre, the clearances from the centre ball ups were 2 to 11, but they didn't. Apart from that one where Track left Steele unguarded on the wrong side. With 21 seconds to go in the second quarter, they really didn't get much dominance out of there that they should have with that many clearances. They really should have scored so much more. But I think the other thing that we're seeing is that there's been talk on the Demonland side about whether Harm should be in there as a tagger. Well, I think Viney might be taking on that new role. He certainly started off on Jones and then was moved to Steele. To limit their effectiveness, and I think that's starting to look like a plan that's working very well because Viney on his own I don't think got a great number of possessions, but Steele was certainly the go-to man for them, and when the chips were down, we had Viney in there again working hard. So it'll be interesting what system they play against Sydney this week.
Just I found the status just scrolled up, not down, but they had centre bounce to inside 50. We only had 1 and they had 9. That's a huge differential. So I presume that means straight out of the centre inside their 50. Just another sort of testament, probably as much as anything to May, but the entire back line. I thought Lever was fantastic. And the centre bounce metres gained, which is a stat that I've not seen before, and it just goes to show how much stats are available that the fans don't get hold of. Centre bounce metres gained with 480 metres to St Kilda and 107 to us. It's nearly way more than 4 times.
Is that taking it off the centre bounce clearances? Because if you're just going on the clearances, which were 11 to 2, you're going to have that lopsided thing for 480 metres gained by St Kilda to our 107 metres.
I suppose it lines up with the centre bounce to inside 59 to 1. Each kick's maybe 40 metres. But the commentators were making that point, weren't they, that they were kicking along inside 50 and we were just defeating them in the air. And, that's how often has that happened to Melbourne in the last 2-3 years where, fans are going bananas, stop kicking it to the hot spot and having the opposition, take it away. And, we're also ground balls post clearance were 13 plus. So we were good in the air and good on the ground. And they didn't seem to have a tactical answer to it. So, again, credit to Goody. And, Ratton didn't have a good day in the box, I don't think.
Yeah. And look, Goody should get some credit. Everyone's pretty quick to jump on top of him when we have a loss, but most of the time you don't really hear the kudos, or he doesn't get the kudos when things go right. And I think he did a few things right this week. They certainly look like they prepared, and maybe that was some of Richo's involvement, knowing St Kilda. But that we don't know. Ed Langdon continues to impress. Love his two-way running. Been saying it all year. We've not had this type of player in a very, very long time. 28 touches, eight marks, which was good. He put his body on the line a few times. 450 metres gained, and I thought was hitting more targets as well with his kicking this week. I was very impressed. George? Yeah,
once again, when I look back at my notes from the first quarter, they simply said Langdon getting leather poisoning, and that was certainly the case. He was fantastic, and it was interesting listening to his radio interview today on SEN, I think it was, talking about how he's it took a little while to get into the swing of things and the game plan that the team is using. So yeah, I'm very glad that he's seeing it that way. I think the other telling thing about Langdon is that the message is getting through to people like May and Salem and Hibbert that Langdon's always an out option because he runs to space and spreads so beautifully. When you're in strife, look down the wing and you'll see where Ed Langdon's opened up the space for you to kick to, and that was certainly something that, as an option, we didn't have last year. So I think he might be one of the best recruits that we made at the end of last year. Glad to have him here.
I didn't have notes on the other wingman that we got over. I didn't write anything, but I was much happier with his game this week. I thought it was one of his Adam Tomlinson, one of his better games for us. Much prefer him sort of more up the ground. He did sort of float back into defence and took some good marks and had some good possessions off half back. But I much prefer him sort of in that playing that role than playing sort of a man-on-man role as a defender. Big man, what are your thoughts on Tomlinson?
Absolutely. I said a couple of weeks ago that the move I'd make is Jones out, Tomlinson to the wing and Omac back in, because he's not a defender, and Omac plays that deep well role. He played it really well, with alternating off Marshall, Membre and King, allowing May to have the game that he did to an extent, supporting him in it at the very least. Tomlinson couldn't have done that. So Tomlinson is actually not that flexible as a defender. You can only play him as a high half back. They couldn't have done that this week, which is why Oscar came back in. But he's better up the ground anyway. Playing on that wing, then he can drop back into the defensive hole. As you said, he took a couple of really telling marks. He's not the quickest, but he covers ground. Don't know what his tracker suggested he ran, but he'd be right up there in terms of distance covered, I'm sure. And he's quite a penetrating kick when he's got time to release it. He can carry the ball 50, 60 metres pretty easily. So, yeah, I thought it was definitely his best game for the D's, and he performed his role. And again, it'd be probably useful to see what sort of distance he ran. Just on that distance he ran, someone posted on Demonland or distance run, Wiedemann had the second most kilometres in the game, which is amazing, really. It's completely surprising.
I saw him a few times. He came up sort of deep into sort of defence or up the wing to take a mark. So, yeah, I'm not surprised about that. I wouldn't have picked him to be the second most, but, I'm not surprised that the numbers were up. And another I didn't have notes on, and the two maybe I'll quickly talk about Omac, because you mentioned him. I don't think he had his best game, but what I like about Omac being in the team, I think it sort of it allows May and allows Lever to play sort of a different role. And I thought we sort of missed that a little bit when he wasn't in the team. I don't know. I do like Omac being in the team, and I know that he cops it a lot, Omac, but I think he adds something by sort of allowing some of the other guys sort of to play a bit differently. I'm not sure what you guys think about that. I know, B-Man, I know you're a fan of Omac.
Well, I think that's spot on. I think there's something about the way he plays that people have a visceral reaction to, because, last week Tomlinson got 6 possessions. No one said a thing. This week Oscar McDonald doubles that and barely put a foot wrong in the last quarter, and not at all. Didn't have a turnover, stepped in and out of traffic. Because
foil at the end as well.
Fantastic for me. That looks great. For others, it's lucky. Even the commentators they'll talk about the defenders and forget that he's there. As I said before we came on, he's like the George Best. He's the 5th Beatle.
Yeah, it was interesting. If you heard Lever's interview as well today, he was asked about Omac's getting into the side, and Lever made the point from his own perspective that he's got to Lever has to be prepared to take on the second best defender. But he said when Omac's there, that means that he gets number 3 and can do what he wants basically in the back line. So I think in this sense, it was a good selection because the threat of Membry and King and one of the resting rucks going down there meant that we did need the three talls. Definitely needed the three talls. If we'd only gone in with the two, we would have really struggled. Marshall was a.
They would have had to have used Tomlinson. They would have had to have used Tomlinson down there, and said Tomlinson's better up the ground. So it was the right move. Selection.
It would have been the old robbing Peter to pay Paul again that we've seen so often up the forward line, but it would have been the same thing down the back line. So I don't think Oscar copes well with the high press like St Kilda ran. He's looking for an out all the time. Hasn't got a great deal of depth with his kicks, and the way their defensive forwards operate, they're right in his face, so he always looks horrible simply because the pressure's right there. But that could be a confidence thing. But while he's bringing the ball to ground and denying opportunities for the talls to get the goals themselves, that's what he's paid to do. So, he'll be around.
Yeah, and he led or close to lead the 1%ers again. And, people don't rate that stat because I don't think they know what that stat means. So the club does that. He may not play this week if it's not a matchup, and maybe that's the role for Oscar this year is he plays when there's a matchup. But to me, it makes sense structurally, and I much prefer Tomlinson up the ground. Yeah.
All my junior coaches always rated 1%ers very highly. I think that was my best stats back in the day.
I got best clubman, but
Trent Rivers, I really like this kid. I was disappointed a few weeks ago when he was dropped. I think he's really impressive, great poise, he's tough, uses the ball well, can take a good grab. For mine, he stays in the team, plays well above the fact that he's only played 5 games, 16 possessions this week, 6 marks, 3 intercept marks. I'm happy for him to stay in the team. George?
Yeah, the commentators were giving him plenty of kudos during the game as well, if I recall, and for good reason. He's an excellent kick and he's got excellent vision, and I think at the end of this season we'll be very glad that we put the games into him, because I think there's going to be a permanent role for him down there. When we've got Salem playing off one side of the ground and Rivers off the other, we've got 2 excellent kicks that can deliver further up the ground. At the moment, he's played 5 games and he's a young kid, and that's probably why he was dropped. You just can't grind them into the ground at this stage. You don't want to lose that talent, but he's got the talent. So, he was fantastic. And even in that last 2 minutes that we'll talk about later on, he laid an absolutely critical tackle as well to deny the opportunities to the Saints. So, it'll be a great experience for him winning in a game like that as well.
Yeah, he's fantastic, isn't he? And one thing I really liked was he made a turnover at one point, but still didn't go back into his shell and kept attacking. He's got a really nice depth on his kick, and his pace was super important, I thought. He's looks young too, doesn't he? So it's, as you say, George, he's just a young fella in his first season. That's his 5th game or so, isn't it? So the club's done pretty well to get Rivers, Pickett, Jackson all playing. He looks something that we really need, which is speed off that half back line, and most importantly, from my perspective, he's an excellent kick.
And good. Credit to the rest of the back line as well. We, held it together despite, an overwhelming forward 50 entry deficit, 46 to 30. Ball did keep coming in there, and May, combined with Lever, who had 13 spoils. Hibberd, Salem, just kept rebounding at the ball out of defence. So, credit to all our back line. I thought it was a really, really solid effort from all of them.
Yeah, one of the best defensive efforts for many a game, really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was, yeah.
Maxi, I thought it was a tough ask. He pretty much did the rucking all night, against Ryder and Marshall. They slightly won the hit-outs, they won the clearances. Both of their rucks managed to go, had the luxury to be able to go forward when they were resting. Both snagged a goal. Luckily for us, you don't come up against two-prong ruck attack like that every week. But I thought, Maxi had a pretty reasonably good game coming back after a stint on the sidelines.
And kicked a goal.
Yes, he did. Sorry, I forgot about that. Yeah. Yes, he did kick a goal.
Yeah. And he kicked it straight.
Yes.
The camera angle, though, from behind, it was hard to tell anything from behind where it was going. So I was sort of happily watching the umpire put the two fingers up. So, yeah, it was a good bit of work. And as George pointed out, in many ways, it's easy to think about the last 10 minutes of that game, but it was really won in the first quarter. Our accuracy, we've talked about accuracy for weeks now, haven't we? And at the end of the day, that was the difference. The inside 50 differential was, I think, 11, wasn't it? So, or more maybe. And that accuracy was so important. And as George noted before, the kick right from the beginning, the first goal we kicked, that he flushed that ball, Petracca, from probably just on 60. And the other one that I thought was fantastic was in the second quarter, Brown's kick from the boundary line.
Yes.
It just really, it's so important. You don't get those goals, you don't get the momentum. Well, we don't win the game, that's obvious.
Well, you saw what happened to them because they missed a couple of howlers that they should have kicked. Membry missed two easy ones that he probably would have kicked when they were playing it at Colonial Stadium, Marvel Stadium, whatever it's called. But yeah, didn't kick him, and that's lost them the match in the end. Brown, I'm going to talk about forward line in a second. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to add a little bit more with Max. I think we've got to be very careful with Max. I don't think he was fully fit for this game, and he was used for pretty well the whole game that I could see. I think Brown did a bit of ruck work in the forward line, but it was a tough, hard game for him against two ruckmen. I think we've got to be very careful.
In the heat as well.
In the heat as well, and we're going up to Cairns. I've been banging on about this for ages, but Bruce is a capable ruckman, can hold his place, and St Kilda have shown Ryder's still very athletic. Doesn't spend a lot of time on the ground, but when you slide one of those big guys forward, they can be very threatening. I mean, Marshall had the chance to actually win the game in that last 2 minutes. He was still as tall as he was in the last 2 minutes as he was in the start. Took a telling mark but wasn't able to convert. And if he converted, it would have been a different result for the game. So with the temperature, I think we've got to be careful that we just don't run Max in the ground off a 4-day break before we get to the serious end of the season.
I just can't see doing it though, George, in terms of the structure. It's just the structure's too important for a good game plan, and I can see them thinking about resting him and playing Bruce because who's the ruck for Sydney? Is it Sinclair?
Sinclair, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Bruce can take Sinclair, and I don't want to suggest that we take this game in any way lightly, but 4-day break after this, Freo. Maybe it is worth considering resting him. I know we'll talk about the changes later, but just on Maxi, the thing that I love about Maxi is the question mark at the beginning, even from some Melbourne fans, was as a captain, would he be able to drop the jokester, the whole, that whole vibe? I think his captaincy this year has just been phenomenal. His spirit for the club, his week in, week out effort. He's already, for me, one of the best captains in the time I've followed the club, just in terms of his pure passion for the club. And on top of all of that, he speaks really well. He's there for fans and for the media, and making football, he puts in hard on the ground, and we really missed him last week.
Yes, we did. Forward line, I don't think we got much out of our small forwards, with the exception of some of the forward pressure of denying the Saints the run and carry off the half bank, which is a signature of the Saints game. I just don't reckon we get enough out of them on the ground, scoreboard pressure, once the ball hits the deck. George, how did we go in terms of tackling in our forward 50 this week? I know you got a keen eye on that stat.
I think it was one tackle inside 50 in the first half, and that went up, and we had 5 in the second half. You're right. We're just not getting enough across the board. We're not getting enough pressure from those forwards, although I think this week they were playing a different defensive setup. So maybe the tackles weren't as critical. That it was more about locking St Kilda in their back line for as long as possible to create the opportunities. So you don't play up as tightly on the individual man, but you're certainly playing better as a group. But it was telling in that last quarter, the pressure that suddenly came from those forwards was what's needed for the other 3 quarters. But I think there'll be a few changes this week off a 4-day break, and as you pointed out, we're just not getting enough out of these guys. None of them kicked a goal this week. If it wasn't for Petracca up there and getting half the team to score, Brown I thought was okay in his role. He presented well and brought the ball to ground as much as needed. Wiedemann gets his couple of goals a week, and that's all that you can ask of a kid like he still is. But it's the small forwards who've got to do a lot more to earn their place in the side.
Just on that, though, I think, George, you make a good point about their role in terms of defensive spread, because clearly that wasn't happening last week. We let the Dogs switch and get out the fat side, and that's what we lost the game. Everyone saw that, where you work super hard to stop St Kilda, who play a very similar, not exactly the same, but a similar strategy in terms of fast ball movement, get it out over the top of the press and allow their players like Hill and Butler to run into open space. We gave them no open space to run into. And on that, they had 36 uncontested possessions inside our forward 50, which is remarkable. They only had 171 all up, so just a touch over 20% of their uncontested possessions were inside our 50, which speaks to how hard those forwards are working to stop the switch, because presumably that means they're just chipping back and forward, trying to open up the ground either side, failing to do so. So, those players would have worked super hard, and Brown in particular, I think, I mentioned before, Wiedemann had the most kilometres for us, I think, or perhaps the second. That stat speaks for a lot of running back and forth, stopping that switch.
Yeah, that 36 possession, that really shows how well our zone worked, and worked really well, because they were able to chip it around in that forward 50. But once they sort of were trying to get out of there, they had no one to kick to. Every time they looked up on half back, there was no one to go to. When they tried to switch it, our zone seemed to migrate across the ground. So I think you're right. There was a lot of hard running, and I think we've got to try and expect a lot of that, week in, week out, because it cost us sort of against the Dogs. So let's hope that they've fixed that. Well, let's talk about the last 5 minutes. I guess there's a bit of a comparison. The last 5 minutes before halftime versus the last 5 minutes of the game. I don't think you can find two more diametrically opposed styles of game playing. In the just before halftime, we were open. We were not accountable. We turned the ball over horrendously. I don't think we didn't lay a tackle in all of the 5 minutes prior to halftime. Coughed up 3 goals fairly quickly. And in contrast to that, the last 5 minutes of the game after Membry's goal, we locked up shop, and we just pressured, harassed, we tackled. It just complete opposites. So I hope something was said, or maybe the leaders sort of got into the ears a bit, but we sort of tightened up our act in that last few minutes.
A bit tough though in some respects, and I agree that we didn't have a great second quarter in terms of our pressure wasn't where it was, but I think the focus was on the zones and the running, and the commentators made the note at one point that they just didn't look like scoring. I think they scored 2 goals in that last 5 minutes, and then they scored the first goal of the third quarter. So they had 3 in a row, but one was on the other side of the break.
No, it was 4 in a row.
4 in a row.
Yeah.
So it was 3.
Yeah,
Yeah, 3 and 1.
3.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So, but it was the brain fade or whatever you want to call it, miss kick or from Jones was a heartbreaker and then to allow that next goal to get them running out, having no one on the defensive side of that contest was a shocker. So it was 45 seconds of not being switched on and so easily could have cost us the game. So, but as you say, Andy, not just the last 5 minutes of the game, I thought the whole second half was just fantastic, the effort, because even as optimistic as I usually am after they scored that first goal of the second half, I was starting to think about the fallout of the game.
Yeah, I thought there was going to be an avalanche. Well, I might play a couple of the last 90 seconds of that last quarter, and then we can chat about what we saw there.
Right, still, they went after him big time. Brayshaw managed to just squeeze the handball out to Melksham. Hunter Clark's got him. Who's going to win this all-important clearance? Zach Jones went at it hard. Got it out, Bradley Hill. Huge chance coming up the Saints. Can they get a mark from the side? Billings leader was good. Chance now behind. Stepped his way through. Here's Geary, the skipper. Can he keep it going? Got it out to Long. 47 seconds remaining. They need a mark. Marshall's down there. Oscar McDonald. There's the big man. And Viney gets it through to Oliver.
Some big moments. Langdon back to Salem. Normally good by foot. Vandenberg's out. So's Melcham if he can be clean. Vandenberg is clean. What's he got ahead of him? Handballs it back to Brown, and Brown goes back to Langdon, not the required distance. They got to bash it long. And a free kick has been given away, so 13 seconds left.
Free kick.
Time back on.
Dougal Howard's just got to go. Got to take every risk. He's chomped up about 4 seconds, doing nothing. Now he goes down the line. Marked by Kent. Sirens.
Oh, well, anyway, Siren's about to go, but the internet dropped out then.
So 50 metre was paid.
Yeah, well, I did. I was just looking for that, and we were lucky then. There were so many great things. There was I'll just go. These are my notes I took from this, and these notes start from about 20 seconds before that. There was that great defensive mark from Tomlinson. There was the handball from Oliver to Langdon. Langdon's kick down the line to Max. Max couldn't mark it, but he made sure to go to the boundary side rather than back towards the corridor. There was a great tackle by Viney on Steele. Salem laid a good tackle. The Lever spoil, the Hibbard desperate tackle. Spargo and Lever double team tackle on Geary. McDonald spoil. Then there was that great composure from Oliver as he got the ball. I think there was Oliver got it from Viney, who got it on the floor, handball to Oliver. Great, Oliver weaving through traffic, looking for the right pass, got it out to Langdon, out to Salem, who kicked it perfectly down the line to Vanders. Vanders sort of got it, held it up a bit. He could have handballed over to Melksham, but he sort of wanted to run the time down. Vanders to Brown. Then Brown kicks it back to Langdon. How that was called not 15, I do not know. I think definitely went at least 20 metres. Langdon's
he called not 15 as soon as he kicked it. So it hadn't even arrived.
As soon as exactly. He made a call without knowing where the ball was actually going to end up going. Just judging from where Langdon was standing. But I don't think you can't do that. You can't call it that early.
And I thought Langdon was really clever to react as quickly as he did, because he would have been in his rights to assume it was going to be paid a mark. And stand there, get tackled, turnover at that spot easily could have gone inside 50 and had a shot at goal.
Well, that's interesting. You know, when they do call play on and the player doesn't hear it but then gets tackled, I mean, that should be dropping the ball, whether they heard that not play on or not. If they had time to do something, because one of their players early in the game had that happen to him, where he's taken the mark. The umpire had called not 15, not 15. He's just standing there thinking he has a mark and then got tackled. I could have seen that happening to Langdon and us getting pinged for that. But yeah, Langdon kicks along, and then there was that other disgraceful umpiring decision. Did you think that was a free against Melksham?
I thought it was unfull.
No, I think it was paid the free.
Paid.
Well, considering that Petracca didn't get the same type of free kicks for being manhandled, I think Melksham barely touched him. Anyway, and then what was happening? Was it because of the way we had set up that Dougal Howard just held on to the? I mean, why wouldn't he just get it and kick it straight away? Was it because we'd set up so well and there was no one for him to go to? Because he wasted quite a bit of time, sort of
mental exhaustion, really. I think for me that one of the things in that whole passage that in the great Oscar Wars, one of the things that often pointed out was that if he gets torched or gets beaten, so often the defender is out of position because no one's putting pressure on the ball carrier. And when you don't put pressure on a AFL footballer running in towards 50, you'd expect them to at least kick it to the forward's advantage. In that last 2 minutes, we put so much pressure on the player from behind. The kick to Tomlinson, I think, was pressure from Hill. The last kick in from that number 41 for the Saints that mopped up was pressure from behind. I forget who, maybe Rivers. Melksham was in that mix. Hibberd was in that mix. So Hibberd came back on with a badly sprained ankle to lay a huge tackle in that last 90 seconds that we just heard. The pressure from behind on that last kick is just so important for the whole game. It was just really evident in that patch.
Yeah. I think this is the third time this year that we've taken the Bickies in a close game. This one, the Carlton one, and I guess you can label the Gold Coast game in that, even though we won by a couple of goals in the end. It's good to see. Sorry?
And the Blues.
Yeah, I mentioned the Blues. So, I mean, in previous years, we're losing games like this, so it's good to get the points in a game like this, and puts us right back into the mix. Going into home. Before we talk changes, anything else you want to bring up from this game, boys?
Well, I think you just hit on it then, Andy. That it not only won us the 4 points, that all of a sudden it starts to, because St Kilda didn't get another 4 points, St Kilda would have gone virtually to a top 4 position. And the number of spots available at the bottom part of the 8, which is probably where we're going to finish if we're good enough, would have reduced considerably. But now we've got, I think it was after the weekend, 7 teams are vying for basically 3 positions at the bottom half of the 8. So it just created that extra opportunity for us in the coming weeks, and if we'd lost this, it would have been, we would need to win 4 out of the last 5 now. So it was a good result all round. Apart from just getting over the line, it did more than that. It was really an 8-point game in this case.
Yeah, and there was a really good result the day before with. The Dogs getting beaten in the end by the Cats. That was an important loss in the end for us. I was looking at that score board after the first quarter thinking, geez, they're going to leapfrog us. So, I agree. It was a super important win, of course. And just going back to Steven May, and what a terrific game. And, and Langdon, if you think they're 2 fantastic footballers to bring to the club, the impact they've had this year. May obviously came last year. And just on the defence, there was another stat that sort of, for me, really reinforced how effective the defence was and how important they were to that victory. They had 26 forward half possession games to our 16, and forward half possessions are kryptonite for footy teams, because if you win a possession, that's why it's such an important stat. You win a possession, forward of centre, you're a really good chance of scoring. And the fact that they struggled to take advantage of that differential and hurt us on the scoreboard is really down to both pressure from behind, as I said, on that kick inside 50, our defensive structure and zone that made it hard for them to find space to run into and lead into or run forward of the ball. But, really May and those bigs down there, Lever included, Omac, just were fantastic.
Yep. Well, let's move on. Looking at the game we've got coming up on Thursday night. There was a scratch match played against Collingwood back in our hub in Queensland. Had a couple of big names playing in that game with Tom McDonald and Fritsch. Fritsch had missed training during the week, or missed 10 minutes of training, and was punished by being left out of the team. So I guess that sends a big message to everyone that I don't know what he was doing or what happened there, but it sends a very big message. He's kicked 4 goals in this game. The D's, I think, have run out 6-goal winners based on the great last quarter. I think from this report, others that impressed Corey Wagner, Oscar Baker on the wing, kicked a couple of goals, and Nev was good in defence, and apparently they were pleased with Austin Bradley's game. So with that, what changes are you guys seeing? Biman, I might start with you. We don't know what's happening with Hibberd. You think he might miss a game or more? So what are your changes this week?
Yeah, well, there's sort of, there's always my changes versus Goody's changes, and after 6 changes last week. So I'll just go with my changes because I can be fairly confident they'll be wrong. So
whatever you say, the opposite.
I'd have Jones out. I reckon he needs a bit of a freshen up. He looked a bit tanked to my eye, but that's a very unscientific. I haven't got his GPS numbers in front of me, so. But if he's going to get a freshen up, 2 games in 9, in the next 9 days, is a pretty good opportunity to give him that break. Similarly, I'd give Cozzy a break. He looked not quite a shadow of himself from a few matches ago, but he's he needs a bit of a freshen up, I reckon. He's a young fella. He's in his first season. He's done well to play as many games, so I'd give him a couple of games as well, and that's no disrespect to the 2 teams we're going to play. But if we're thinking finals, which they are, all of the players are saying that that's what their focus is on. Then you've got to plan for it, and I want him fresh in the finals. Hibbo's sprain sounded really bad, so I don't think he's any chance of playing, and they'll give him at least a Swans game to recover. Hannon was given the opportunity last week with the late withdrawal of Jones, and just hasn't taken it. He might have worked super hard, so maybe that gives him some credit in the bank. I'm not sure, but his kicking was terrible. Couldn't stick a tackle at all, and that was probably one of my biggest frustrations. He just couldn't nail him. They were running through him. So I think they all go out. I wonder whether Bennell might come in. Again, if they're thinking him for finals, well, he's got to get some game time into his legs, and so now's the time to do it. But he's got to play at some point. As I say, no disrespect to the Swans or Freo, but this is the time, a chance to do it. But if he does come back in, he'll have to be a lot more physical than he was in that Crows game. I thought Hunt, but that was based on the sort of thinking that Cozzy might have done something serious, but by all accounts, he just slept in. So as someone who's slept in more times than I've eaten dinner, I'm not going to hang him for that. So I think Freddie will come back in. I think Bedford might come in for Cozzy. If not Bedford, maybe Corey Wagner, which will cause Demonland to explode with the double Wagner, the Wagner stereo.
Well, what do you think of Wagner? We didn't talk about him. I thought he was serviceable.
Yeah, I thought he was good. I didn't mention he's the new fifth beater.
Yeah. George, what are your changes this week?
Along similar lines, I think this week we have to start resting players. This is probably the easiest game that we've got until the end of the season. Fritsch, you would think, would come back in if he's been a good boy this week. I agree with Binman. Pickett looks spent. I had questions over Spargo as well, except for the last quarter. Hannon, I think, as Binman has also said, didn't take his opportunities. And likewise, I was thinking whether Bennell has an opportunity to come in for one of those up forward. But I also think Bedford, this would be the week that you give Bedford a run up forward. I'd like to see us give Max a rest, whether it's Bruce or coming in. I just can't see us grinding him into the ground. And if we do make finals, you just don't want a half-injured ruckman, solitary ruckman, going into the final. So we'll see what the coach will do. He obviously doesn't take our advice based on what we've talked about before. But yeah, I think I think there's a couple up forward of either deserving of a rest or need a rest at this point. This is the easiest game that we've got. So yeah, I think we've worked through the other one was Vanders, who looked very stilted this week. I'm wondering whether he needs a rest and or Jones. One out of those two they didn't provide. Neither of them provided a great deal for us during the game. So we might have 6 changes again this week.
I have one more. And so the other in, I reckon, and is for me a natural swap for Hibbert is Smith. And I just don't think he was nearly as bad as what many said he was. He was given a role that he's not suited for, I think, is that third big Oscar McDonald or Tomlinson's role that he's played. I'd love to see him come in and sit him on Papley. He's a gun, super smart player, probably too smart for Smith, but he's likely, give him a couple of goals and that's fine. Maybe that's the KPI for Smith, but Smith has the capabilities athletically of going with him. If he goes out with instructions just to wear him all game, don't move off his hip, crunch him at every opportunity. He's tall enough and got a strong enough leap to make sure Papley doesn't mark it in the air. Look to tackle hard and just generally make life super difficult for him. He's a natural, and if it's not for me, I'd love to see him come back in, give it another chance. And if not him, Lockhart who was pretty unlucky, it has to be said, to go out last week, but maybe they were thinking about resting him last week as well.
I always get a little bit nervous, George. You were saying it's our easiest game. I don't think you mustn't have been following the D's too closely, because these are the exact type of games that we used to drop. Let's hope this is a new Melbourne, and because with these 2 weeks, in terms of setting up our season, because we got GWS, who I hope might be coming into some form. That's not going to be an easy game. And look, I'm hoping Essendon are out of it. But then again, back in 2017, Collingwood were out of it, and look what happened to us in the last game there. I don't want to go into the last match needing to win to get in. I want to be true Melbourne, because you just know what's going to happen in that game. I'm just get a bit nervous saying they're easy games, because they're not, and I hope the players don't take it as an easy game, because I think too often in the past that might have happened just mentally in the back of their mind. So let's hope everyone's switched on. Bimman, anything else you?
For Thursday, Andy?
Yeah, go for it. Or if there's anything else in terms of the game that you want to talk about the upcoming match.
Just the weather. It's going to be fairly cloudy, slight chance of a shower, wind southeasterly 15 to 20 kilometres tending south to east to southeasterly 20-25 during the morning, but becoming light in the evening, 28 degrees maximum. So that's perfect.
No rain.
Game.
No rain-soaked grounds
or howling winds.
Yeah. What about we play again a few days after that? What's the prognosis?
Monday. Well, it is there Monday. Well, here we go. So Monday's possible shower, 3 mils, 29 max. So nice and steamy.
Yes.
Is that a night game, that one? I think it is a night game, isn't it?
That one's, yes, that's 7:10, I think, and this one's a 4:40 game. So,
and speaking of they initially, I'm sure, 100% sure they were going to fly in, fly out of Cairns, but on the radio today, the interview with Melksham tonight was on 3AW, and he said that they're staying in Cairns between the two games.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think that's much better for us. It's more settled. I like that. We get to train in the conditions as well, which can't understate that. I like that. Happy with that. Much better than the fly in, fly out.
If Rich sleeps in, that means he doesn't miss an aeroplane, and to at least make it to the ground.
So our run home. It's interesting. They took away off the AFL side, unless I'm missing it completely, the ladder predictor, which was one of my favourite things towards the end of the year. Last year, obviously, had no use for it, but going in that 2018 final series, I had so many permutations going on. Does anyone know of any other ladder predictors out there, with the exception of me having to create something of my own?
No,
are there any ladder predictors out there that you know of?
No, sorry, but I did do some work on the different variables and who's playing when in terms of our.
Give me some variables.
Variables. Well, I'm not sure about the statistic you brought to the table last week about 1,000,000 to 1 if we lose all 5. But we have won the first one. And I'm not sure how many 8-point games we get, but assuming they're all 4-point games, so we're in the 8 at the moment. Our competitors for that spot in the mix, GWS, Carlton less so now that they've lost that game, but Carlton, Collingwood.
I'd say it's pretty much the teams out of it's GWS and Bulldogs out of it at the moment, and they're the ones. I don't think Essendon and Carlton are in equal.
And the Dogs. So coming up, the Pies have got 2 games against the top 5 teams, and those top 5 teams are set in stone. So they're the best 5 teams in the Port Adelaide, Geelong, Brisbane, Richmond, and West Coast. They're locked in. The top 5 are all very strong teams. The Pies have got 2 games against those those top 5 teams and a bye. The Dogs have got 1 against the top 5 teams and a bye. The Saints have got 1 against one of those teams and a bye. GWS don't have a game against any of those teams, but their 4 games include a game against the Blues, a game against us, and a game against the Saints. So no easy run for them. And that combination of those teams all play each other once, I think. So, not exactly. So one of them's going to knock out the other one. I think St Kilda GWS is the last game of the season for them, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and even if you want to include Essendon, if you have a look at their draw, it's pretty tough. I think they've got tough ones for the rest of the year, so that's why I've sort of ruled them out. But we've still got to play.
Yeah, I wouldn't rule them out completely because this week they've got Hurley back and Heppel back, and they've got Danaher back as well. Stringer's in the side that he wasn't in earlier on in the year. So, they're actually getting stronger towards the end of the season, so we wouldn't write them off at all.
But they've only got the draw in the mix, so they're only on 26 points. So they would, God, if it comes down to Melbourne, Essendon to make it, I was about to say I'm going on holidays, but there's nowhere to go. I'll knock on the neighbour's door to see whether I can stay there the night or something.
I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because that's always dangerous territory. But if we if we were to finish eighth, I don't like the prospect of playing West Coast in a first final. Do we know? And as I said, really getting ahead of myself. Do we know what's happening in terms of finals where they're being played? Are they all likely to be played in Queensland?
No.
Are we going to have to go to Perth?
No.
Or is that not a...
No, they're almost certainly going to be all. They might fly in, fly out for some in Adelaide. Is what is a good chance, I think, because they can't really play all of the games at Carrara and at Metricon and the Gabba. The Metricon's looking like
they're all
needs a bit of a spell.
Yeah. Well, looks
like the cow paddock that it is outside.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, well, that's that Perth thing was a bit worrying, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. We can talk about that in a few weeks or not. Before we wrap this up, anything else that's caught your eye this week?
I thought it was interesting. Both sides in this game only used 77 or 76, 77 interchanges. So I wasn't quite sure what was going on there, particularly in a game that was hard paced and it wasn't cool by any stretch of the imagination. So I don't know whether they're holding players on the ground for long periods of time. So I think Jones in particular was off the ground for a large portion of the last quarter. Wagner was as well. Just an observation.
Yeah.
Interesting. The other sort of thought I had was, for a long time following the Ds, we've had, one, maybe two max A graders. And really, that you need to have 3-4 A graders to make it to that top level. And then, a good number of sort of middle level B graders to help you get there as well. And we're sort of building the B graders. I think George pointed out, it was a really good one last week, that we fall away pretty sharply after our best, say, 23, 24. But when you think we've got Petracca and what he's capable of at the moment, Steven May, who's I think will make All-Australian, Clayton Oliver, who's in career best form, and he's already made All-Australian twice, isn't it? So Max Gawn, the best ruckman in the league. I think he's gone past Grundy. Everyone would acknowledge that this year. And then, Jack Viney sort of not too far away from that level, certainly in effort. At 4A graders in this team is something that's been a long time in supporting the Ds, where, probably the 90s, late 90s is the last time we had 4A graders, I reckon.
100% right. Just something that annoyed me this week was on the footy show. Remember we talked last week about May, the amount of goals conceded on him. We had I went through all the teams. He only had one on him this week as well. So he's had a remarkable the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks or so. He's had 3 goals kicked on him. So the footy show on Sunday, Matty Lloyd had the board up and he had he had similar stats, but they've got it completely wrong. There was absolutely terrible reporting about these stats. They took basically just the goal stats for the game and not actual goals kicked on May. So any player they thought that he was on that they've given all their goals that they kicked in that game. But when you actually look at what happened in the game, it tells a different picture. First of all, Josh Kennedy didn't kick a goal in round 1 at all, and they had him having a goal. They've given a goal to Dixon, which was actually a free kick against Max in the ruck. Lynch, who kicked 3 goals, and he kicked one of his goals when he was on lever. One of Hawkins' goal was on lever. One of Gunston's goals was on Oscar McDonald. And also, I think one of Reed's goals for Collingwood was a free kick against Hibberd. So they've put up this thing saying how good Steven May's been, but he's actually been even better than that because they had completely the wrong stats. And so that annoyed me, but I don't expect much less from some of the commentators out there.
What were their stats for Daniel Talia from Adelaide then? He would have been horrible.
Well, I don't know. All I saw was May's stats. So, yeah, May's got to definitely be in the conversation for All-Australian. I suspect he'll definitely get into the squad, but whether he gets I guess we've got the next 4 weeks he's got to sort of stamp his name in those books, but I don't know. I think they might leave him out of that.
As George noted last week, Andrews is probably ahead of him, but May's coming pretty quick after. I mean, that's one of the better performances I've seen, from a Melbourne player just about. I mean, you take him out of that team, we don't win that game. Same with Petracca, and same with Oliver. Any one of those three players doesn't play that game, and I don't think we win it. So that just goes to the influence of all three, but particularly May and Petracca.
Well, he's got plenty of opportunities this week against Sam Reid to continue his goal suppression activities. I don't think Sam Reid's in any great form whatsoever, but that's all Sydney can put up at the moment. They're rather decimated by injuries throughout. I think they've got probably 8 or 10 players who are out for the season, including Franklin, of course. So Stephen hopefully will continue with his record.
Yeah, and they're playing for, they can be a wild card, of course. Any team, you've got to obviously be switched on, but you're starting to get to that stage of the season where teams converging or diverging in different directions. Final bound teams are in a particular mindset, and the teams that are clearly not going to make it are thinking about postseason surgery and not getting injured. And, we're not far away from that. In 3 weeks is the last round of the season. So, that's when they start putting players away as well for surgery and drafting and all of that sort of thing. One final thing, Andy, that I had just with all of your might on social media and your the power of the Demonland brand, I was hoping that you might be able to drive a campaign that I'm interested in.
Oh, go ahead.
It occurred to me that I found out that they were talking about down the ground shots, that they have the footage of all the down the ground shots. The club have them fed into the box. I think we spoke about it 3 weeks ago. Fox and Seven, they have that shot, and the teams get that shot as well for their post-game reviews. And what I'm hoping that you'll be able to convince Fox to do on KO is to have a replay option of just the down the ground shot, the full down the ground, so I can watch a full game of footy from down the ground as we could call it the COVID Ponsford experience. Would provide. I'd watch it. I'd probably be one of the few nerds that would, but I certainly would just to see the setup. And I was watching Formula One last night, and that's one of the options is not down the ground, but the driver view, and just having a different way of looking at a sport is, I think a terrific option. And last night, there was less cameras, and the ground, for me, it was a better viewing experience because you could see more of the ground and you could see the setups better, the structure better, the amount of running the players did. If you could start building momentum, and
I think you
low pressure.
I think you overestimate the power and the reach of Demonland. But I'm sure I don't watch much American sport, but I'm sure that they probably have options like that on their cable TV where you can watch you can choose your own angle. I have no idea whether they can or can't, but I would assume that that's sort of the case for American sports. And in this day and age, I don't see why they can't provide that. The technology would be there, but I don't know.
That's what I want to hear, Andy. That's what I want to hear.
I don't know, but if you can put a proposal together, I'm happy to help you try and get some traction there. All right, boys. I think we're going to end it there. Thank you very much, Bin Man. Thank you very much, George. Much appreciated. So we've got a game on Thursday, boys. yep, if you want to stay on the line just for a couple of minutes, might discuss when we're going to do our next shows after this, considering our compressed fixture. Well, go D's, and we'll see you next week, maybe on Friday. All right.
Go Red Legs.
Come on, come on.